surrounded by pro-Gaddafi forces. Both sides are armed with tanks and anti-aircraft guns. Gaddafi's crackdown against his opponents has been the bloodiest and most ruthless in the wave of uprisings sweeping North Africa and the Middle East. But it doesn't seem to have stemmed the rebellion against his 4-decade rule. In the east of the country, opposition forces are welcoming visitors to what they are calling Free Libya. In the city of Benghazi, there are signs of a return to normal. Banks have reopened here and in the town of Al-Baida, both of which threw off Gaddafi's rule about a week ago.
The banks have been closed for 8 days, but thanks to our brave young men, they've managed to reopen in an orderly fashion. And praise be to God, everything is moving along smoothly.
And while residents stock up at the supermarket, the power vacuum that was left in the city is being filled. Local committees that are running towns and cities in the east of Libya have rallied behind a new leader, the former justice minister who resigned over the brutal repression.
What is happening in Libya is a popular revolution led by the youth, supported by the people against oppression and against a dictator who has led Libya with a singular point of view and with a vengeful attitude and bloodthirsty soul. Now we announce to the world that we intend to build a democratic nation with institutions that respect international obligations and treaties.
Libya relies on its oil fields. They're the mainstay of its economy. But now production appears to be grinding to a halt. This refinery is pumping 11,000 barrels a day, only 1/10 of what it would normally produce, according to the manager. The expatriate workers who used to man the plant have fled to escape the violence. Muammar Gaddafi's options are shrinking. Opposition forces continue to advance towards the capital, and the international community has imposed sanctions which further limit his room for manoeuvre. But the Libyan leader still shows no sign of being in the mood to surrender. Jackie Rowland, Al Jazeera, Benghazi.
Now let's take a look at the main players in Gaddafi's inner sanctum. We've heard a lot from the leader and his son Saif, but it's no coincidence the two closest men to Gaddafi are also the leader's flesh and blood. His third son, Saadi, is commander of Libya's special forces and has been in charge of the crackdown on demonstrations. Son number 4, Mutassim Gaddafi, has a reputation as a playboy, but in his position as national security advisor, has influence over the Libyan military. Others of the inner circle may not remain so loyal. Abu Bakr Yunus Jabir is the defense minister, but hasn't been seen or heard of since the uprising began. That's led to rumors he's resigned or is under house arrest. Also among possible defectors is Colonel Abdullah al-Senussi. He's Gaddafi's brother-in-law and the director of military intelligence. But the man who could deal the death blow is Musa Kusa. He's the foreign affairs minister and a former head of external intelligence. Kusa is conspicuous by his absence from the list of senior Libyans under a travel ban. Now, as the pressure mounts, what are the options for the embattled Libyan leader? Lawrence Lee takes a look at that.
So what next for Gaddafi? Assuming he will not go voluntarily, his next moves must surely be predicated on where he believes he still has support and to what extent he can block his opponents from marching against him. A look at Western Libya presents problems for both the opposition fighters and for Gaddafi. The coastal road from the east is blocked at Sirte, Gaddafi's hometown, which he still controls. It's not a big place, but the roads either side of it are said to be controlled by armed forces loyal to Gaddafi. As such, it presents the biggest obstacle to forces from the east moving on Tripoli. Yet west of Sirte and still east of Tripoli, the rebels are said to now hold Misurata. The town has been the scene of days of heavy fighting, with the city falling and then being counter-attacked by pro-Gaddafi forces. But he now seems to have lost the army and therefore the town. Just as significant is the town of Azawiya, just west of Tripoli. Geographically, it's crucial. Latest reports from the town of 200,000 say after days of heavy fighting, the rebels are in charge in the centre, but the pro-Gaddafi forces are surrounding it. It's hardly surprising Gaddafi wants it back. If the rebels do keep control, it would leave Tripoli in a pincer. So what of the situation in the capital? The most recent images from foreign media invited by the Gaddafis suggest hasty attempts to clean up the centre and an area around Gaddafi's stronghold still said to be under his control. But contrary to Gaddafi's claims, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that Tripoli is not stable, and some reports have suggested dozens killed in clashes. Scenes from some of the poor suburbs like AlJazeera in eastern Tripoli seem to suggest the police have simply melted away. It all lends weight to reports from Tripoli that Gaddafi's forces have been trying to pay local men to take up arms against the insurgency. There's no question the ground upon which Gaddafi built his empire is slipping away. His military options look increasingly limited. Lawrence Lee, Al Jazeera.
The United Nations estimates that more than 1,000 civilians have been killed in the fighting in Libya so far, but the Gaddafi family denies force is being used against the protesters. Speaking to the American network ABC, Saif al-Islam, one of Gaddafi's sons, said the reporting on Libya is biased.
Show me a single attack, show me a single bomb, show me a single casualty. The Libyan Air Force destroyed just the ammunition sites, where the big stores of ammunition and depot. That's it. The point that you are hearing rumors, false reports, please take your camera tomorrow morning, even this night, go to every city in Libya. Everything is calm, everything is peaceful. The point, there is a big gap between reality and the media reports.
Now, for a second day in a row, top US officials have called on Gaddafi to step down immediately. For more on that, let's cross to Nick Clark in Washington, D.C. Nick?
And yes, thanks very much. Well, just before Hillary Clinton took off to Geneva for a meeting on Libya with other foreign ministers, she said it was, quote, time for Gaddafi to go. Now, Clinton also said that she has been in touch with Libyans who are attempting to organize themselves in the east of the country, which is now in the hands of anti-government protesters. Meanwhile, two senior US senators, the Republican John McCain and independent Joe Lieberman, have been calling for a stronger response from the Obama administration on Libya. The politicians made the comments during a visit to Liberation Square, which is the main site of Egypt's revolution. We'll have more details on that in just a moment. But for more on Hillary Clinton's comments, let's cross to Al Jazeera's John Terrett, who's live for us right outside the White House. John, the administration clearly ramping up the pressure a little bit, but there's still some dissent.
Yeah, Nick, upping the ante, they call it. And we now know why they're upping the ante, because the State Department, it turns out, was very worried about the number of Americans left behind in Libya. And do you remember that catamaran ferry that docked in Malta in the port of Valletta at the back end of last week? Well, that was carrying, I understand, most of the Americans who wish to get out of Libya at this time, certainly from Tripoli. And I think the State Department now feels more open and able to speak more freely and a little bit more aggressively than it did last week, now that those American citizens are on their way home or back in the United States. And so we have the Secretary of State on her way to Geneva saying that the US is prepared to offer any kind of assistance to Libyans who might wish to rise up and overthrow Colonel Gaddafi. And two key senators, John McCain, the Republican, and Joe Lieberman, a hawkish independent in the Senate, both of them calling for the immediate imposition of a no-fly zone over Libya, for the recognition of the provisional government that's clearly forming now in the form of a national council in Benghazi. And in the case of Joe Lieberman, calling for the US government to consider supporting and supplying weapons to members of the Libyan opposition. Nick?
All right, John, leave it there for the moment. Thanks very much indeed. Tell you what, let's take a look now at the evolution of the United States response to the events in Libya. The first high-level reaction came from US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton on Monday, February the 21st, when she called for a halt to the unacceptable bloodshed. At that point, Human Rights Watch said at least 233 people had been killed. But on the same day, a senior Obama administration official said US authorities were looking into possibilities for, quote, meaningful reform. The following day, Clinton once again asked the Libyan government to take actions to end the violence, but US officials stopped short of criticizing Gaddafi personally or demanding that he step down. President Barack Obama made his first public comments on the crisis on Wednesday, calling the crackdown by Libyan security forces outrageous, but he stopped short of backing sanctions against the country. The next day, Obama gave his first televised response, asking the world to unite in holding Libyan leaders accountable and promising to deploy a, quote, full range of options. And on Friday, Washington announced that it had imposed sanctions, including freezing the American-held assets of Gaddafi and his family, and that it had closed its US embassy in Tripoli. On the same day, a US charter plane evacuated American citizens from Libya. The next day, Saturday, Obama said Gaddafi had, quote, lost the legitimacy to rule and needs to do what is right for his country by leaving now. So, can and should the US do more in Libya? To help us analyse this, take this on, we're joined by the retired US Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. He was Chief of Staff to former US Secretary of State Colin Powell, among several other positions he held at the US State Department. Colonel Wilkerson, thanks very much indeed for joining us here. When Hillary Clinton says the US is prepared and ready to go to offer any kind of assistance to Libya, how far does that mean?
It's a good question. We have to remember, as you were running through the evolution as you Brits call it, I was remarking to myself, you have to get your citizens out before you make anything really dramatic. That's just the way we do things. You don't want your citizens captured, you don't want them taken hostages and so forth. So while some might say, well, he dithered, I'd say he handled the situation rather well, moving up, ratcheting up the pressure as he moved along. President Obama, I mean. What can we do? What can we do? We don't want to put U.S. troops on the ground. The moment they go on the ground, they got big red bullseyes on their back for every al-Qaeda or al-Qaeda-like individual in the Maghreb, Northern Africa, and the vicinity. But can we spur NATO or some other troops that might be suitable for this into going on the ground in Libya if that's necessary?
But Hillary
Perhaps
Clinton
so.
actually says any kind of assistance. Any kind of assistance seems to be the whole gamut of possibilities and options.
Well, it does. I mean, it's like
not ruling
saying,
anything out, is
it's
it?
like saying no options off the table. I mean, it seems to be the diplomatic parlance of the day.
Okay, what about the view that the administration should throw its full weight behind this kind of nascent interim administration that's evolving in Benghazi?
Well, I think we have to kind of wait and see what, and I know that doesn't satisfy people who want action taken right away, but you've got to wait and see how things develop themselves. This is the same situation that I'd look at in other places like Yemen or Bahrain or Egypt or Tunisia. If the people take care of it themselves, even if it's a little bit bloody, it's better than an outside force or forces exerting their pressure on them and trying to force things into a mold that perhaps the people don't want anything to do with. The best way to bring democracy to any place is through the people who want that democracy.
All right, okay, hang on there for a second, Colonel Wilkerson, because I just want to bring the thoughts of those who are trying to turn up the heat a little. Speaking during a visit to Cairo on Sunday, the independent US Senator Joe Lieberman said the US must support the Libyan opposition in their struggle against Gaddafi. He said, quote, "We've got to recognize the opposition provisional government as a legitimate government of Libya, and that we ought to give that government certainly humanitarian assistance and military arms." So, Colonel Walker said Senator Lieberman's thinking that military arms should be supplied.
Frankly, I wouldn't pay too much attention to Senator Lieberman. I've taken him off my scale. His picture's not on my piano there. He's not a person I'd listen to with regard to national security. John McCain's another case, and I haven't heard anything significant from Senator McCain.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Point.
Hang on there, because we
You're
can
gonna
hear
give
that
it
right
to
now.
me?
Yeah, I'm going to give
Yeah,
it to you
okay.
right now. You can give a comment on that in a second. Yeah, the US Republican Senator John McCain said that further restrictions needed to be imposed against Libya by the United Nations Security Council. Have a listen to this.
We think that there should be a no-fly zone established over Tripoli in Libya so that helicopters and airplanes will be stopped from massacring people. We think that there should be a provisional government set up in Libya that we would support with material assistance if necessary.
So what about this concept of a no-fly zone? Is that a route the president can go down?
It is a route. However, I haven't seen all that many reports on high-performance aircraft or even helicopters flying in a way that was...
Yeah, but isn't it more about preventing the possibility of that happening?
Well, you know, I would rather see others than us do it. I would rather see the Germans, the Italians, the French, or someone else do it than us. And again, we've got just too many military instruments deployed out in the world right now. We don't need any more.
Okay, but as a concept, it's a good idea.
As a concept, yes, but I don't see what it's going to do if that's not the way they're doing it. What I've seen and what I've been reported on from the area to me is that the bloodshed, the violence is mostly people to people on the ground.
All right, Lawrence Wilkerson, good to get your perspective on this. We appreciate that. Thanks very much
Surely.
indeed.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, a little bit more from us later in the program. That's all for now from Washington. Now it's back to you in Doha.
Thanks, Nick. Now let's go to our correspondent, Hoda Abdelhamid. She's in Benghazi in eastern Libya. Hoda, just a few minutes ago, we listened to Saif al-Islam, the son of Muammar Gaddafi, talking to a United States television network, ABC. And in that interview, he said that everything is calm, everything is peaceful. Now, does that bear any resemblance to reality, what you're seeing on the ground there?